All right, welcome to Conversations with Keyshawn and Alexandra. We're two longtime friends and quite a long time.
Quite a long time.
Yes, we're two longtime friends with a tendency toward reflective, thought-provoking conversation. Sometimes our conversations are random, other times, like now, they are based on themes in media. Today, we're talking about Queen Sugar, season 6, episode 7. So we are very much in the second half of this final season. For anyone who may be new here, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is not a recap. So we're assuming that you've watched the episode already, which is to say that if you have not watched the episode and you are not a fan of spoilers, even though this isn't a recap, we're going to be speaking with the assumption that you've already watched the episode. So if you don't want that, go ahead, pause this, watch the show, come back. We'll be here. Let's see. Yes. So, yes, this is episode 7. And
Mhm.
again, for those of you who are new, and even for those of you who are regulars, and we had a little break. So, folks might have forgotten how we do it around here. But we noticed that there seems to be a potential theme or a thread throughout the titles of the episodes.
Mhm.
So we are just going to recap what those titles are. Let me see if I can. There we go. So if let's try that again when the doesn't want to decide
the
to jump out right
the
then.
sonnet, the poem that's being built
Yes.
episode by episode.
All right. If you could enter their dreaming and dream with them deeply, you would come back different to a different day, moving so easily through that common depth, or maybe just stay there. They would bloom and welcome you.
Mm. They would bloom and welcome you. So wait, wasn't they would bloom and welcome you? Okay, so I must have seen the title to the next episode earlier. I was like, there was something about brothers and sisters, but that must be a different.
La 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 la.
I was like, because, and the reason I that stood out because when I went to watch it, I was, watching it on my browser through the cable provider. It showed like 7 and 7 again. So I'm like, is it? But the way that the episode ended today, it didn't specifically say like to be continued. We know it's being continued,
Right.
but I was like, how many episodes are they giving us? Are they giving us 10 or are we getting just
It's
8?
no, it's 10.
It's 10 for sure. Okay. Okay.
All right. So, and with the blooming, of course, bloom makes you think of flowers, but
Hmm.
um, if we're thinking like dream context, that could be clouds, that could be we'll just see. We'll just have to wait and see, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, blooming, I guess I would think flowers, but yeah, because I guess the harvest doesn't really bloom per se. I think bloom we assume like floral or some type of like evolution or
Ooh, evolution.
full expression of whatever a
Okay.
thing is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. You're so look at you. All right. So what I was thinking, because this episode, so typically, um, going back to what we were saying earlier, it's not a recap. We don't necessarily go scene by scene. We don't necessarily go in order. However, in today's episode, there they there was a lot of separation, so it's relatively easy to separate them out. But there are two stories that are was inextricably intertwined. So I'd like to save those for last, if you don't mind.
Okay.
All right.
And I don't know which one those are
Right.
off the top of my head. I can guess, but I guess when it's time to talk about them, then we'll talk about
Absolutely. All right. So, Micah,
them.
the professor is being spotted.
Again, spotted
Yes.
Professor Tall Lady has made
Right.
a
And
reappearance.
and with you mentioning her height, there again, I was looking and I was like, is she very tall? Is it the way they shoot? Is Micah just very compact?
There was a moment, and this is me again, just like throwing it out there. There was a moment when I first saw her height and was like, is she a trans woman? Because she's big. She's a big actress. And I was like, well, that would be very progressive of Queen Sugar.
Well, really what I was gonna say when you said that rather is like, oh well, if that's the case, then that would definitely pave the way. Well, I mean, not even pave the way. That's like beyond what we were,
But I was saying like meaning like
Right, right,
the actress, maybe
right.
not necessarily the character is trans, but I was like, maybe the actress is a trans woman. Not to say that women can't be tall, but that's a big one. That's a largely tall lady.
Mhm.
Maybe perhaps it is intentional to kind of show the quote unquote power dynamic between her and Micah because he's a younger guy and she's an older woman. However, I was just really proud of him this episode. He did not disappoint me. He hasn't disappointed me so far this season, I would say, but I was very proud that he stood his ground and reclaimed his power and recognized that, their last interaction, she kind of like dismissed him like a child. And he this time stood his ground in his manhood in a way, not only through presenting his debate, to the class, but then also letting her know when she made an advance toward him at the end of that he was not having that.
Right.
He was not interested at all. I was happy to see him do that.
Right.
Sure. I even tweeted about it. And he was like,
Nice. Well, and so yeah, my one of my notes was like that clearly intelligence turns her on, which relatable content. But he's not interested. And so it's like, okay, is he over it or over her? Or is he now finding himself interested in someone else?
it might be a little bit of all of the above. I think a part of him is over it as far as being like her dirty little secret.
Right.
I think a part of him is over her, meaning she already dumped him and told him essentially that he was too immature to be with her.
Right.
And he might be exploring something with his other friend.
Right.
So
Right.
it could be a little bit of all of those for him as to the real reason behind why he decided to reject her advances and really step away, quite literally step away from her.
Right. Because now I can't remember the exact wording you used. It was something about, yeah, I can't remember the exact wording you used. But what it was something about kind of like the way he expressed confidence with her, but what it was going to lead me to is that he also expressed, or I should say displayed, a confidence, a self-assuredness in terms of what is being shown to people when in a little earlier in the episode he and Isaiah, or is they were chopping it up, and before they parted ways they were hugging, and probably the same two guys that side-eyed them the other time they were walking by, and they were looking and they were side-eyeing again, and he deepened the hug like but at the same time a part of me, just for like a quick flash, was like, okay, now let's not get performative, right?
Well, that's exactly what I thought.
Right.
That's exactly how I felt. I felt that they did the initial like dap you up embrace where men will kind of like hold the handshake and do the one arm hug.
Right. Yep.
And then when the guys walked by, it was like a double armed embrace.
Right.
And he looked at them while he was doing it, which at first my first thought was, oh, you're performing. This is your way of saying like, this is normal, guys, look, as opposed to saying like, we are a couple, we are
right,
you know what I mean?
So definitely that, but I mean in terms of what I don't want is for him to be trying so hard to prove a point to other people that he inadvertently hurts Isaiah because
he's leading him on or giving him the wrong impression.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Hmm.
I could see that. I mean, that was, yeah, that was my first thought. When I saw that earlier on, when we first saw Mike on this episode, I felt that it was more of a, this is okay. And I'm going to show you that it's okay because I'm me, I'm Micah on this campus and blah, blah, blah. However, it didn't feel genuine to
Right.
me. It felt more like we might see more of that, and eventually projecting that Isaiah will be like, okay, so are you feeling me or not? Because I don't need you to be my advocate and
Right.
do performative public displays of affection
Right.
to try to prove a point. I'm not interested in that.
Right. Also, going back to the point about how, just the professor is so noticeably taller than not just Micah, but in that room when Micah was doing his presentation and, everybody was leaving, including Isaiah, but, Isaiah was kind of hanging close by. And he's also, well, he's actually a little shorter than Micah, which we've noticed before. But again, since in the context of the professor, Micah seems so small. And then, now Isaiah is even smaller. I like basically whenever she's in a room, everyone else looks like children.
Everyone else looks like children because she is like the Jolly Green Giant. Yes. Everyone else looks like children, which may or may not be intentional. But even in that scene when she was like leaning on the desk holding a clipboard, I was like, your feet are firmly planted on the ground and you are leaning at an angle. Like, you're tall.
Right.
And I mean, granted, in real life, she might be 5'10" because everybody looks gigantic
Yeah,
on TV. But
compared to yes, compared to actors, 5'10" is 7 feet.
exact 7 feet tall. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And she was wearing a pump, but that's the exact shot that I was thinking about, is that, it
Mhm.
was kind of that full body shot. And that's when I really was like, okay, she's a whole lot of woman. I mean,
Mhm.
let me not get too deep. I was gonna say still a little slim for my taste, but she's not, she's not petite.
She's
Uh,
not petite. No, no, because most of the other women on the show are. I would say that's another reason why she stands out.
right. Um, Well, and then the other thing, since we have talked about color a bit before, is that when it was Micah, the professor, and Isaiah in the room, I was like, okay, like this is, the three, three of the most fair people that we see on the show all in a room together. It was, I don't know, it just stood out to me.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, I
Especially
think,
because, oh, I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say, I think it stands out also because when we think of like the characters on the show as a whole, there's only three characters, two of which are male and one is a female, that are brown skin or dark skin folks. Everybody else falls into the light skin spectrum. Everybody. Yeah. Because I'm looking at Ralph Angel, Hollywood, and Nova are the only like brown skin, dark skin folks.
Vi
Um,
is not light skinned.
I would say that Vi would be on the light skin spectrum more than the dark skin spectrum.
I think
I
she's
would definitely say that.
comfortably
I
brown.
was gonna
Now,
say,
mind you, dear viewer, uh, depending on where you're from, but I don't know if we've kind of acknowledged this before, but when you get into conversations about color, you also have to think that whenever you talk about color in the context of Louisiana, there's definitely a few more layers
well,
that come
yeah. I
into
mean,
play.
in Louisiana, you have people who can pass for white.
Right,
So no, I would say Vi is not white passing. She
right.
is definitely on the lighter shade of brown for sure,
Hmm.
in comparison to her spouse, her nephew, and her niece. Definitely the lighter shade of brown. Even if you look at her and her brother Ernest, she is definitely lighter than him as far as the,
Look,
you know.
now, look, I might have to rewatch after we hang up.
Well, a good scene for that is the scene,
Oh,
which
the
we'll get to
families.
later on, where the family's sitting around the table. So
Right.
anytime that there's a scene in the show where they have the family sitting around the dinner table, the the color spectrum is more visible probably than any other time because you're seeing
Right.
them all sit next to each
Right.
other
As opposed to like now where you're just trying to
in
recall.
separate scenes. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so speaking of a little another contrasting duo, Prosper and Billy Badass.
Mhm.
I will say when we got to this, I a part of me started to text you, like, but then I was like, no, A, she got it, and B, we can hash it out here.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I I feel like it's I mean, I appreciate the effort that's going into like creating the space for Prosper to be able to make amends. Was it just me, or did he call her Maybelline at some point in
Oh
this
no, it's
episode, or was it just imagining that?
what is his nickname for her? May, it's not Maybell, it's like,
Something else. I was like, did he just call her Maybelline? But I couldn't
uh
rewind it. I was like,
is it May, it's like Mabel, is it like,
Maybelline?
oh no,
Like
Mabley, Mabley, like Mably.
Maybelline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I really was like, oh, Maybelline. Is that her real name? Billy is short for Maybelline?
Oh,
Apparently not.
look, why am I just now putting together that Billy might be girl child?
It's not
Anyway,
her full name and it's
well,
a nickname. Yeah.
well, because especially now that I've been in the South, I meet people, I meet Willies where that's what's actually on their birth
Is
certificate.
like their actual
Yes.
name. Yeah. Yes, yeah.
So,
Or like JR's, their name is JR. They're not a junior. Their
right,
actual name is two letters.
right.
Mhm.
Sometimes with a space in between, girl.
Sometimes with this space.
Mm-hmm.
They have to go to the DMV. First name, J space R.
Girl. Yes. So anyhow, but okay. So even to get to, them trying, really trying, right, to um come to a place of understanding, we learned that she had never told him
No.
about what happened. And as they started talking, he gets a call from, his family, right?
Mhm.
um and he finally put his daughter, no quotes, before his son,
Mhm.
which, that's been one of her biggest pain points during this trip. So that I was like, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and she was visibly, as soon as she heard,
you're right.
well, as soon as she answered the phone, obviously, and she passed it to him, she was already, you could see her body language was already prepared to be like, oh, let me just
Right.
let me become less important because one of the borderlones needs you.
Mhm.
And then he gently grabbed her arm to say, like, no, no, I'm gonna put you first
Right.
for probably the first time in a
Right.
long time, for
Right.
sure. So yeah, that was a noticeable move on his part to try to make the effort to say, no, we're starting a conversation. It's one of those uncomfortable conversations, but we're going to have it. I'm not going to let anything distract me, even if one of the borderlones is having an emergency.
Right. Right.
I'm not going to make their sense of urgency my emergency. I'm going to be here with you because
Right.
that's what's most important right now, which I thought was really good. I thought that was really good. I also thought it was very, what do you call it? True to life. Like, I can't speak for every woman who experienced, sexual assault or non-consensual touch when she was a teenager. It's very common for her not to mention it to the men in her life,
Right. Right.
grandfathers, fathers, uncles, because there's something maybe deep below the layers that says they won't get it. They're probably going to think the same thing he did because they're the same gender. And then
Right.
I think maybe in Billy's case, to my knowledge, her parents were still a couple at the time. So
Right.
she told her mother, and her
Mhm.
mother didn't really embrace it. So why go tell a second parent with the possibility of experiencing the same result?
Not only did her mother not embrace it, but she told her that it was her fault.
Yeah, she victim blamed her, is what we would call it in
Yes.
present times.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah. And
So
even then, I mean, Prosper's response was, she came from a different time. And I'm like, well, did she come from a different time than you? How old was she?
that's what I was thinking. I'm like, wait, was she older? Because, you and I have asked a few times, like, are we going to get a little bit of backstory on the mom? Because at this point, we don't really know too much about it.
Don't know much about her. So maybe she was older and maybe Prosper was her Hollywood. I don't know.
Huh. Huh.
maybe that's why she's gone. You know what I mean? She
Maybe.
has transitioned to the
Right,
next
just
stage.
natural causes.
Just natural old. I'm 15 years older than my husband. It is, or 20 or 30, whatever it is,
Right,
but 20 years. Yeah. But no, I was grateful that they had that opportunity, and also that he, later on in the episode we see him inviting her to stay, and again
right.
dropping some little more nuggets about your children are grown. So I'm
Yes,
like, okay, so you got kids, but you ain't got babies at home. You have children,
right. Well,
which is
'cause
interesting because it brings me to like language. I don't refer to my son as a kid
right.
anymore. I have a child.
Mhm.
However, I don't have any kids
Right.
because he's a grown person.
Because at
So,
first, yeah, I definitely, when he was like, the kids had grown, and at first I was like, "Er?" But then I was like, well, no, that makes sense.
mhm,
Keyshawn's son is an adult. I have
mhm.
other friends in my age group who once about to become a grandmother. So, um,
Girl. Mm-mm. I ain't about to be no grandma until I'm at least 60. That's the conversation that I've had with my son.
good luck.
You need to be 30. And I think when you're, if it, I was going to say, I see that being a real
I mean, it's
possibility for
possible.
me,
It is.
mainly because I mean, I was older than my mom when I had my first child. I also, no one talked to me about sex or safe sex or protect. If it wasn't on a commercial or after school commercial, I didn't know shit. That's not the relationship with Seth. So I
Right.
feel like there's so much more awareness for him of like what parenting entails.
Right.
And I think also growing up as an only child, there's no part of him that's been parentified. So he's like, I don't even like kids. And I'm
Word.
like, great, good.
Word. And two, yeah, because you all do have such frank conversations, and then even though you have worked to um just to limit any extremes either way in terms of like toxic
Yeah.
masculinity or even veering too far in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
At growing up as a young man, though, he's still, as you talked about before, prioritizing his career and his goals before trying to do everything else. So yeah, he could easily wait
Right.
until mid to late 30s before
Right.
um
Right.
yeah. um so the other story that kind of well, no, there's two more stories that kind of stand alone for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
uh Nova, I mean, because at first when we first see Nova and you're just kind of seeing the aftermath of everything, and she's waking up in this, and so at first I'm like, girl, you left it like that. But then I'm like, no, you got home and you were exhausted.
And you
So
just
that
crashed.
part, yeah. But then two, I'm like, so Professor Dom, you just dropped her off? You didn't offer to sweep or nothing?
You want to come inside and do a walkthrough with her to make sure she was safe and somebody didn't jump through her window or something while she was gone?
Or that leave something behind? Like,
Or like offer to sleep on the sofa just in case she got scared in the middle of the night?
right. So
You're
that,
seeming more and more like a suspect, sir. More and more.
right. And then later, Charlie drops by and we realize, because this is one of those episodes that's jam packed. So it's a little while before you realize, like, oh, this is only the day after the last episode. Um,
Right.
and so she didn't tell her family what had happened. And that was facilitated by the fact that, you know, Professor Dom had been right there and he picked her up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and remember, she was panicking when he had asked if there was anyone he could call.
Right.
So he didn't call anyone, and apparently she didn't call anyone either. So her mentioning it to Charlie, it was brand new information when she
Right.
did that with Charlie.
Right.
Um, so we'll continue to see how the ripple effect of this plays out over the rest of the season. Whether knowing her, knowing the Borderlands, it'll probably be a catalyst for her to, be like, man, bump this. I'm about to I was gonna take it up a notch. Now I'm about to turn it up to max.
We're going from 0 to 100 real
Right.
quick.
Real
We're not
quick.
going to be taking no kind of baby steps or anything. Now y'all wrecked my house. She's coming from a family. It's like balls to the wall. Last season, just what? Everything. Bring it all. Bring it everything. Bring it all out. Set the friggin' city on fire. That's what we need to do. And
Right.
we're all leaving anyway because I'm about
Yeah.
to go to California.
So yeah, speaking of Charlie, for most of the episode, she's playing a support role. She's supporting Ralph
Mhm.
Angel as he's going through, his various ups and downs in this episode that we'll talk about. And then, when she comes over to see Nova and she realizes what's happened, that sibling bond comes into play. And even though Nova is older, because of just Charlie's general, disposition, she is in a
Mhm.
position to kind of take the lead and comfort her. And I'm not even going to say reassure her, but like just, give her that pep talk. Like I'm almost picturing either like a rap battle or like a coaching circle where it's just like, rah, 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 you got this, you got this. I don't care what they was trying to do.
Right. Like what we're not gonna do is crumble. That's what we're not gonna do.
Right,
So
right,
yeah. No, that was a good scene. I mean, it's I like even when she comes to the door and Nova's like, "No, I'm trying to tell you something. Like I need you to listen to understand that if I'm asking you to hold space for me, that's kind of a big deal because of the older sibling dynamic. It's like I think of myself, I can count on maybe one hand the number of times that I've reached out to my siblings to be like, I need your support for something because there's automatically the belief that says older sibling, I'm the one y'all come to for support, but not the other way around. But there have been times when I'm like, so I don't know what you can do, but I can't do nothing right now. So anything you can do will be better. And sometimes it is just the pep talk or the words of affirmation or the encouragement that's needed. And that's enough to kind of like dust you off and kind of get you back
right,
in your groove.
right. And so after, you know, being in position to provide the support in those ways to, Ralph, Angel, Nova, really the family as a whole, then and also while she was with Nova, she kind of had um in this way, I'll say that Charlie and I are probably similar. I don't talk about things while I'm thinking about them. By the time I mention it to someone outside of my head, I'm decided, right? So for
Mm.
her to say to Nova, yeah, I think I might run for Congress. And so it's like she's framing it as like, oh, I'm still pondering. But what's the first thing happening in the next scene? Do, 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 do. Yes, I'm ready to run for United States Congress.
And the guy was even like, well, straight to the point. I like it. It's like, yeah, and we're not calling to chop it up and talk about what we saw on Grey's Anatomy last night. I'm calling to tell you what my plan is politically. Yeah. Oh yeah. I I would say I'm becoming more of that person because I recognize, they say like G's move in silence like lasagna. So I've started to share less of what my next moves really are until I'm ready to just announce them publicly. And so I can respect Charlie's method of doing that, especially because the person that she would really want to consult with would be her significant other now, Davis. And we already saw those conversations happen
Right,
in previous
right,
episodes. So she doesn't really need to consult her siblings or anybody in St. Joe for that matter, because she's already placed herself in a position of power as a politician on a smaller scale. So it
mhm,
would be more like informing them as
right,
opposed to consulting with them,
right,
which is what I think we saw when she told Nova,
right.
even if it sounded like more of a suggestion, but she was clearly already doing it.
Right. And even, as far as like the consulting piece, Micah was part of that too. Because
Yes,
if
right.
if Micah had vetoed it, it probably wasn't gonna happen,
It probably
honestly.
wouldn't happen. Mm-mm.
And sometimes, like occasionally, I do wish, I don't know if I want to say that I was more comfortable or that I guess it depends on what the decision is. Once in a while, I do want the opportunity to bounce ideas off of people, because sometimes you need to hear stuff out loud to process it, depending on what it is. And sometimes, especially for me, growing up as an only child, I spend a lot of time in my own head anyway. So sometimes I want to get external feedback just so that I know, like, okay, it's not just the echo chamber of my own consciousness. Does this make sense to you outside of my head too? But
That's fair.
again, even for me to care or, be thinking that far, it's because I'm like, here's the decision and I'm here. I just might need like that 0.01% of just outer
Just
feedback.
like the wind to blow, like, okay, good. Decision made. Making a decision has been made. Thank you. Yeah.
Right.
I can understand that. I can understand that. Yeah.
Oh,
The sounding board so that you don't the sounding board so that you confirm with yourself that you don't sound crazy.
right.
Even if it's a crazy idea, even if
Right.
it's outside the box. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's not even like I'm talking to you about, because and this happens in some of you and my conversations, no doubt. Like, I'm not telling you about it or talking to you about it so that you can tell me not to do it. It's just kind of like again, just kind of validating, like, this makes sense. Are there
Mm-hmm.
gaps that I haven't considered? But it's not really like a should I? No. It's gonna happen. It's just
It's more of a FYI.
right,
This is on my
right,
agenda of decisions that have been made. And
right.
just wanted you to know. That's it.
or,
Just
or,
in
or like
case.
I said, sometimes just like that, like fill in some of those gaps, because like even like as similar as you and I are, we do process things in different ways at times, and so it can be helpful to be like, okay, um I can't even think of an example right now, but yeah, I know we've had conversations where we're like, yes, that makes total sense, but also, have you considered? And then
I
it's like,
remember what came to mind was, I mean, this was months ago when you were considering a road trip from Dallas to California around New Year's.
what?
And you
That
mentioned
had to be more
it
than a few months ago. I was like, that sounds like something I would have said years ago.
in
I
January.
definitely
So it was
wouldn't
in
have been.
January. It was like the beginning of this year. Yeah, definitely more than a few months. It was the beginning of this year. And I remember when you were telling me about it, I was like, huh, okay.
During
Well,
COVID times, I was trying to drive to California.
this was a conversation between you and I. It was 10 months ago, but you were contemplating a road trip from Texas to California around New Year's. And I was like, well, that's an interesting plan that you have, friend. Now, granted, it didn't happen.
I'm like, there must have been some very effective vices at play, because
And again, it wasn't like you were asking for my opinion or obviously not to affirm your decision. It was more just like, yeah, so I'm thinking about doing this. I was going to be like you and like a couple other people at the time. Somebody that I think you might have been interested in some way was going to be a part of this journey.
oh, ooh, wow, that feels like 3 lifetimes.
Doesn't it feel like 100 years ago? It was only 10 months ago, but
Okay,
that's the example that I thought of when it was
okay.
kind of like, huh, all right then. Well, I mean, it sounds like you got it all planned out.
Yeah, I was going to be a backup driver in a group.
The backup driver.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm like, okay, girl.
You're like, road trip during COVID times? Me? I'm like, you. Yeah, that was you.
That wow, that really feels
That
like it
happened.
was 10 years ago.
It was not. It was 10 months ago, which in COVID times might feel like years because we're on a whole different timeline now. But
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
nonetheless.
But yeah. Okay, look, we go this whole sidebar right there. So okay. What I would like to do, there is a part of Vi's story that stands alone, and then the rest ties in to the rest. So Vi has located Celine. She's safe. Gabriel is in school, happy to hear that. And of course, once Vi is assured that she is safe and well, she got to get in that ass. And I mean, Celine knew it was coming. So,
No surprises here.
right. So they did that. And Celine was she was tearful and apologetic their whole exchange. But something she said that really stood out to me, because unfortunately I know all too many people, possibly, but especially women, can relate, is that she talked about the fact that um she was in her daddy's house, and then she was in her husband's house, and the exact thing she said was, I don't even know who I am without a man to tell me.
Yeah,
Girl.
that
but
stood out.
but I know that that's a truth for a lot of people,
So
unfortunately.
many people. Hmm.
Especially, I mean, it's still true probably for some not exennials, zillennials. No, that's,
Zillennials.
well, no, because exennials and zillennials one are the same thing. And and also it's the point where Generation X meets millennials. I'm trying to talk about the other
Like
side.
merges with
Right.
millennials. Yeah.
So like I would be as a zillennial in that way.
Right.
But,
Okay.
the I guess, what's it, Generation Y or the Zoomers, whatever
I guess
the youngest adults are.
pardon me. Sorry. I'm like, there's just a bit of
I
a
was how,
sideshow happening outside of my apartment, but
look, it's COVID times. Look, we're working from home. It's
I
understandable.
was like, well, but yes, to your point, that stood out to me as well because she said, I mean, I don't remember the exact dialogue before that, but she said, like, I was with my dad and then I was with my husband. And then, it just kind of like, that's how some women, that's all they know.
Right.
And whether they're like in their parents' house, into the dormitory, and then into, adulthood, like Seth has friends like that, young women who are in their barely 20s who, as soon as they got to school, once they got situated in their dorm, it was like, gotta find a man, kind of thing. And it's like, you're in college, find yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because like this is your chance to do that. You're away from your parents' house. This is your space to do that. But a lot of women don't. And then I'm a part of this other, group that we meet with my sisters and a couple other women each week. And last week we were talking about, everybody kind of letting us know in the group, like, what are some things that you're calling into your life? What are some intentions? What are some goals? And we kind of each went around and shared something unique. My sisters and I all share something career related. The other 6 to 10 women who are in this group all said, I want to get married. I want to be married. I want a husband. And I'm like, now, granted, one of my sisters is married, one of my sisters is engaged, and then my other sister is unattached. However, even if they weren't married or engaged, I still don't see them saying that that would be a goal for them.
Not at this
Is
point in their developments.
not at this point in their developments, not at any point. I don't ever recall my sisters or myself being like young girls who were like, I can't wait to get married someday. Hell no. I can't wait to have babies. No, that wasn't that because we weren't groomed like that,
Okay.
you know. So we weren't groomed that way. We were groomed to be the very independent women that we are. And the fact that we have been in partnerships or marriages or relationships or all the above, even within those relationships, the dynamic is that we're still operating very much as independents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because yeah, I've not considered relationships to be a goal or something to put on like the list of things to accomplish. But I know that it is a very common thing. And even going to now I'm realizing I might not have finished the previous thought, but back to the point of, the things that you would typically think of as being like, oh, older generations or even like our age group. But no, there are 20 somethings who are still like, yes, I want to find my life partner by the end of next year. And, you know, like, yeah, it's a trip. It's a trip. Does not compute.
Does not compute. No, does not compute. I mean, and I recognize that for some 20 somethings, 30 somethings women, their desire or the priority that's placed on marriage is rooted in religious practices
Right.
that say, I can't be out here hoeing in these streets and still be right with God. So let me go ahead and get myself a husband, even though that's not a reason to get married.
That's what I used
So
to that's what I used to say about J-Lo when everyone used to crack jokes
she's a
about how
Catholic, so
she'd
she ain't.
always exactly how she'd be married all the time. And I'm like, well, you got to remember she was probably raised Catholic, so she has to sanctify having sex. She
She
can't
has
just
to.
be having sex. She
She
has
can't just be. Mm-mm.
except for Puffy because not
And
the
look where that got her. Almost shot. See.
right. But it's also interesting. And of course, we're not gonna do a whole podcast episode about J Lo, but it is interesting that she was so willing and able to marry, almost everyone she's been in like publicly significant relationships with, except for the black man. But back to the show.
Anywho, coincidence? Yeah.
So then, me with my super random observations. When Vi was sitting with Celine, the table was at a really weird height. And so, like, as Celine was kind of reaching toward Vi, but she knew better than to like actually initiate physical contact because she knew she's very much on probation. But it was almost like a high table, almost like the table that I have in front of me now. So it's like she's kind of like this. And
Mm-hmm.
at first I was like, well, maybe she's slouching because she's trying to the way that you do when you're kind of presenting, you're putting yourself at someone else's mercy, so you make yourself small. But then when Vi reached toward her again but didn't touch her, um her arms were also at this like kind of like here, and I was like, are they and at first I was like, are they at like a bar table? But I'm like, no, if they were at a bar table, there'd be proper chairs to put them at the in the right relationship. But then I was like, okay, Alexandra, you're doing it again. It's That's not the most
I
important
mean,
aspect.
sometimes the scene breakdown. No, sometimes scene breakdown is important. And I noticed that they were, looking camera angle, like
Right.
they kind of cut them right at the bust rib cage area. So I don't know what that was about, but it's a notable observation.
Because I maybe I was putting
I'm
my
sure the cinematographer will appreciate you
I was just gonna
noticing
say,
that.
I feel like I was putting on my Keyshawn, behind the TV scenes thing too, because I was also looking at Paula, Celine, and wondering like, okay, is this a role where she's actually getting to not wear makeup, or do they have on natural looking, you know, makeup, which a lot of shows do. Like even when you look at people and you're like, oh yeah, that has to be their natural face. But it's no. It's still not
Yeah,
her.
no, it's probably a little bit of both. I
Mhm.
mean, I think her character, they could have her like somewhat barefaced, but then
Right,
they can add dark circles under the eyes to make
right.
her look more tired or haggard,
Mhm.
essentially. And so that might not be her actual just barefaced, because
Right,
you could be barefaced and be glowing, but when you're on the run in struggle mode, you ain't gonna be glowy and
right,
dewy like. That's not.
right.
They need to make her look a little rough. Yeah.
And so, there, Vi is saying like, so she gives her some money, and which I mean, honestly, is more than a whole lot of folks would have done. But she also had to let her know, and I don't know if Celine believes her, and we will probably never find out. I'm guessing this is the last time we're going to see Celine. But, Vi had to let her know, like, listen, my family has a whole lot going on right now. So this is going to be the last time I can help you.
That's
Um,
right.
which, is extremely valid. But again, of course, Celine doesn't necessarily know what's happening with Vi's family. So she may just be like, she's just saying that. Da, da, da. But I mean, it doesn't matter because anyway, you slice it, you need to get a job.
You need to go. You need
Yeah.
to go. Like the Vi Get on Your Feet scholarship program has ended. This is
That,
your last contribution.